reason I think that'll happen if we don't teach students is many will leave the church and some will leave their faith. Now, I don't want to overstate this. There have been some apologists who have been like, this is the only reason and all we got to do is apologetics to the church. Look, I get to hang out with youth ministry folks like yourselves. I get to hang out with like apologists. My apologist friends are like, it's true, give them evidence, give them facts. And I'm like, relationships matter. Hang out with youth ministry folks, and it tends to be we got to build relationships and spend time. And I'm like, that's right. But we've got to teach students that it's true and give them facts and give them evidence. It's both. It's both. So one reason, not the only reason, there's a lot of reasons kids disengage the church. It could be hypocrisy, which is relational, that they see. It could be worldview. It could be pain and hurt they go through. But one big reason, Frank Church says students are talked out of the faith because they were never talked into it. I think he's right about that. Many students are talked out of the faith because they're never talked into it. If you don't really think something's true, that's not an anchor that a kid's going to hold on to. Now, does that guarantee a kid won't walk away? No, I taught high school 21 years at a Christian school Bible. An apologist would take students on apologetics trips, and I have a handful of students who are atheists now. There's no guarantee. But I can tell you, if we don't ground our kids in not only here's what Christianity teaches, but we have good reason to believe it's true, many will walk away because they were never talked into it. So I think the reality is students don't leave the faith because of questions or doubt, but because of unexpressed questions or doubts. Let me say, this might be one of the most important things I said. I don't know, you can be the judge of that. But I want to relieve you of the need or pressure to feel like you're the expert and you have to have all the answers. I think one reason some people don't teach apologetics is like, what if my kids ask me these questions? I don't know the answer to it. My answer is, it's fine. You don't have to know the answer. There's a lot of things I can't do and won't do. Apologetics is my lane. You don't have to have all the answers. But what's so interesting is that kids who doubt, yes, we got to help them have answers. But one of the biggest things we can do is not freak out at questions, invite questions, and just show it's okay to have questions. Good for you. I love you anyways. When I looked at my dad, this great apologist, when I was, I think, 19 years old, and I was like, Dad, I don't know if I think this is true. I don't know, I got a lot of questions. He didn't freak out. He didn't go, what? I raised you, didn't read these books. He didn't freak out. He just goes, I think that's great. And I was like, did you hear anything that I just said? He goes, only reject what you've learned growing up if you're convinced it's not true. He said, I love you no matter what. I mean, if you seek after truth, you'll follow Jesus. I kind of compare it to, I travel decent amounts, but still, to this day, I don't know how many flights I've been on. When there's turbulence, I always look ahead to the stewardess. And they're never like doing this number, like freaking out. If they did, I would probably freak out. They just look calm. I'm like, okay, they know something I don't know, we're good. I talk to so many people who have deconstructed their faith to the point of deconversion. And their questions and their doubts were shot down. They weren't invited. They weren't listened to. Well, just read the Bible. Just have faith. Don't doubt. One of my friends was literally told by his youth pastor, he goes, just sleep on your Bible physically. That was his advice. Rather than just saying, you know what, that's a great question. I don't even know the answer to that. Let's figure it out together. Let's do some research. Let's talk about it. It's almost like you and I are just showing, hey, you can have faith and you can have questions. That's okay. That's a part of the journey, is inviting questions. So, quick primer on this. I probably should have started with this. All we need by apologetics. 1 Peter 3:15 says, in your hearts honor Christ the Lord. That's where it's supposed to start. Probably some of you have resistance to this talk because you've had a bad experience with an apologist. And as best as I can I just apologize, whoever that apologist, well-meaning, might be. I've had some of those myself. But notice where it starts. The whole purpose is to honor Christ. If we don't start with that, then we're not going to defend him well. That's the whole point. If your heart is not in the right spot, then of course it's going to turn to an argumentative, arrogant interaction. Honor Christ as Lord, always being prepared to make a defense, which is where we get apologia from, to anyone who asks you a reason for the hope that is in you. That's it. And by the way, this isn't just for Bible teachers. It's not just for youth pastors. It's actually for everybody. It's not a spiritual gift of being an apologist. Now, some people are more inclined towards it than others, which is fine. But it's actually something all of us are called to do. You see at Pentecost, Peter says, "Men of Israel, hear these words. Jesus of Nazareth, the man attested to by God, with mighty works and wonders and signs that God did through him in your midst. As you yourselves know, this Jesus God raised up, and of that we are all witnesses." In the first speech, they're like miracles. Jesus rose from the grave. We are witnesses of this. We have seen this. You might say the first one, being ready with the defense, is negative apologetics. When somebody asks, ready with an answer. But then there's positive, where we're making a case that the Bible's true. Making a case that God exists. Making a case that Jesus is God. It's both of those. In a sense, here's what I think apologetics is just a ministry to strengthen believers and remove intellectual barriers for genuine seekers. That's it. It's a ministry to strengthen and encourage believers. What I found is when we start to have answers, wow, I understand the case for the Bible. Well, I can really see that Jesus claimed to be God. There's a certain confidence that comes with that. It strengthens and encourages believers. Moore the Carpenter, my dad wrote that in his evangelistic text. Evidence that demands verdict was actually written primarily to strengthen believers, even though both have been used for both. It's a ministry. That's it. Now, let me throw out there just 3 ideas, practical ideas, because my argument is that to try to encourage you to make apologetics just one piece of what you do. Here's a few ideas, and we'll open up for questions and see what might be helpful. One is just teach an apologetic series. Look at your calendar for the year and do one series. Maybe it's 4 weeks, maybe it's 10 weeks, maybe it's longer. But one series consistently, at least each year, minimally. Now, in part, what does this do? You can't cover everything in one series, but it communicates to students there's answers if you're willing to look. We use our mind in the Christian faith, and truth matters. Just do one series. Then we could talk about series you can get through DYM. There's others online. There's series we could talk about. Maybe you do it yourself. Here's one idea I've seen work. I think it's a great idea. I've seen church small groups and youth ministries say, all right, next week I'm going to ask you your toughest questions about God. I want you to think about it during the week. The kind of question that bothers you. The kind of question that maybe wakes you up at night that you don't know how to answer. I'm going to ask you next week, and I want you to write it down. And then I'm going to bring all of these together, and we're going to do a 3-parter, 5-parter, 10-part series, talking and teaching through your toughest questions. You know what? I want you to each invite one friend, because these are probably the same questions that they have. You have content. But then what's happening to you? Now you got to do some research. Now you got to go in and figure stuff out. And you're building your worldview up. You don't have to have all the answers. Just having that conversation, giving them some tools is a win. It's a win. But that also helps students feel like, wow, my voice matters. I get to speak into this. I've wondered about this. So that's one idea. I'd also encourage you to think about it. You probably have maybe 10% of your students, I don't know, maybe more, are like your future doctors, your future lawyers. They're just thinkers and they question things. Oftentimes, they don't feel like they get what they want out of youth group because it's experiential and it's feeling-based. And we need experiences, we need feelings. I have a youth pastor who said, I kind of identified those students It was like a Wednesday night. They went through Doug Groteis's book, Christian Apologetics, which is like almost a grad level text. You don't have to use that one. It was Wednesday nights. I had 3 to 5 students over. We'd have pizza, we'd have ice cream, and we would just talk through with these students and pour into them, because they're the kinds of students who want more depth than we can often offer on maybe a Wednesday night or a Sunday morning. That's something to think about. You might do a weekend series. JD, we did that at your church 2 years ago. We did a whole weekend focused on apologetics. That's one way to do it. So I don't know what it looks like in your context, but as you look at your calendar, as you plan things out, make it just one piece and one staple of what you do. Second, work apologetics and apologetics point into each lesson, or at least try to do so. Now, what might this look like? Imagine you're teaching Jesus with a woman at the well in John 4. Do you know we know exactly where that well is? Because there's only one well between kind of Samaria and Jerusalem. It's kind of interesting. When you show a picture archaeologically, say, hey, here's the story of Jesus, but we actually know where this took place, and they can see it. This could be a manuscript find, it could be an archaeological find, it could be an ethical point. As you have your lesson, just say, is there any way I can add something to help students know this is true? Now, what does that do? In their minds, it's like a drumbeat just reminding them, these aren't just stories. This isn't just about my values. Hey, friends, this is true. This took place in history. Science backs this up. And it just becomes like a drumbeat that over time helps them to move from a compartmentalized faith to seeing that this is actually true. For example, there's like an entire 2 archaeological study Bibles. As you're teaching them something, throw up a slide and go, hey, here's the story of Jesus in Bethesda. Guess what? We found these wells they talk about in John 5. We've actually found them. And John got it right. And then move on. That helps connect that this is not just, spiritual truth, whatever that means. This is real. This happened. And finally, my last encouragement is to equip parents to train their students. I know many of you do this already. But think about equipping parents to pass on how we know the Bible's true. Do a series for parents on the big questions and give them tools how to actually translate and have conversations with their kids. Every morning, I did this morning. My 12-year-old son, I get up and I make him breakfast, and we read the Gospel of John together. I wish I'd done this with my 2 little kids. It just never crossed my mind. When I thought of this idea, I'm like, that's awesome. So I made him oatmeal this morning. It was probably 4 minutes this morning. Sometimes we have more time. We open the Bible, we read it, and we just talk about it. That's a practical idea somebody gave me to pass on the faith. Parents are hungry for tools. So as you equip them in other ways you need to, think about equipping them with apologetics in the sense of the big questions that this generation is asking. And give them the confidence and the tools to have these conversations. Because the data shows, since 1972, the most influential voices in the lives of our kids are not you, they're not me, they're parents, period. Hands down. All the data shows that. If we give parents practical tools, then they will want to do this in many cases if we show them how. A lot more could be said, but I want to make sure we had time for questions. Do we have a mic? Perfect. We've got a mic that can roam around. Questions, thoughts, challenges about this or something else, something that didn't make sense, something that could help you process this. Let's talk about it. Now, I know the first question is often tough, so let's skip the first question and go straight to the second one. See one up front here? All right, let's see how many steps we can get in for. I was about to call you Josh, but I don't know how to manage this.
So that third point, equipping parents. If you were to just suggest one resource that you would say, hey, every parent needs this apologetics resource, is it a book, article, what would it be?
This is for you. No, not a Bible. So the next generation will know. That's a book I wrote with J. Warner Wallace, former atheist, And we subtly weave in apologetics, but it's more a how-to book on how to actually do this. So that's for you. Anybody else about to do a parent series and you would, all right, saw it firsthand, that's yours? So that's one that might help. I mean, honestly, what I love about Mourn the Carpenter is it's small and it's easy and it doesn't take a lot of work. Don't give a parent evidence that demands verdicts unless they ask for it. That is a 700-page book. Like, their heart will literally sink as you hand it to them. Unless they're in that 5 or 10% that's like, I love this. So I actually think you're not going to find a better book than Mourn the Carpenter that just says, hey, this will start, this will open the conversation. So that's some of the apologetics. So the next generation will know is more, here's how you do this. Here's what it looks like, if that makes sense. Good question. Yes? Oh, no, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Quick question. Why do you think that people are so quick these days to defend the identity of like someone that's professing as LGBTQ plus or whatever that new one is, when they have like all the chemical, DNA against that argument, but then when it comes to Jesus, they're quick to be in opposition when there is so much behind it, his identity?
I think, in general, if I'm right about the objective to subjective shift, we identify ourselves not by objective markers in the world. This is my family. This is my country. This is my faith. Now it's shifted internally. This is how I feel. This is who I am. And if I don't affirm who you are and how you feel, now I'm the bigot. Now I'm hateful. Now I'm intolerant. So I think in people's minds there's been that shift, that identity is rooted in who I define myself to be. Now, I don't think it's coincidence that we've seen the shift at the same time mental health, illness, and concerns have exploded. We're not meant to look internally to define ourselves and find ourselves. We can't. It doesn't work. And so I think that's an assumption people have, that what I believe is who I am, how I feel is who I am. And Jesus, I would say people still want Jesus on their side. Like if I'm talking about issues, I go, well, Jesus believed this, that carries some weight, but only some of the teachings of Jesus. Matthew 19 on marriage, not sure I'm with him on that one. His teachings on hell, yeah, we can explain that differently. So I think it's a sense of authority about who I am comes from how I feel. And yeah, we can leave it at that. Does that make sense? I think that's at the root of it.
I love it. I just tying it in with, I think with your boss from the Christian spoke. Do you think that's part of the cultural compulsion that will happen when they start to recognize that shift you're talking about?
I don't know that I'm tracking fully with your question.
Never mind.
Okay, so in apologetics, I didn't talk about this, but one of the most important things to talk about is what is truth? How do we discover truth? Why is truth important? What's the difference between objective and subjective truth? Does religion and morality make objective claims about reality? That's something we kind of have to establish in this mind. So when my dad first wrote Evidence of Man's Verdict in 1972, there were no chapters on truth. Everyone believed there's such thing as truth. We can discover it. You should search for it. In the most recent edition, there's multiple chapters on truth because people are so confused about that. They don't even realize it's an assumption they bring to issues and relationships. Where'd the mic go? Boom.
With teaching apologetics with students and trying to get them and encourage them to share their faith, I think sometimes a lot of things that I hear are like, oh, I did it once and people didn't listen, and I'm just like, do it again. But is there anything else that you'd encourage to like help get the students to like just continue even in the face of adversity or people not listening?
So I would say a couple things. One of the shifts that I try to make is rather than teaching apologetics, train in apologetics. You got to get students in the game. So think about it this way. If you just teach, you got to learn how to defend the faith, and you're not doing it, there's no drama, there's no sense of urgency. But if, hey, I'm bringing in a Mormon to talk about what he believes, or I'm bringing in an atheist to talk about what he believes, or we're going to visit I don't know, going to visit a mosque, then students are like, oh, I'm a little bit more interested in knowing what Islam is. So I would find ways to get our students out doing it, so to speak, sharing their faith. I grew up on crew, and they would have us go out and like knock on doors and share the 4 spiritual laws. Honestly, I hated that. Maybe it's just me, but we send our students on college campuses just with surveys. Just ask questions. Just get into conversations. Some people are open, some people are not. So just teaching students how to have spiritual conversations is about 80% of it. Learning those kind of tools.
So following along with the training idea, how would you make sure to set up students to care for people's like spiritual result and not just have it be kind of like a debate club and winning? Because I know with some of our students, they've been at Christian schools and they almost treated apologetics like, oh, I have to win this, rather than I want someone to find truth.
So we can err on 2 sides. One is, I just love this person, but never speak truth. The other side is like, speak truth, but not care about the person. We have kids in our group who need one. We have kids in our group who need the other. And so for the kids who tend to just speak truth and not care about relationships of the person, we've got to find a way to kind of humble them and frame what the purpose of apologetics is. So for me, it's the most effective thing that I do. We were talking about this. I did this at your church 2 years ago. Is I role play an atheist, and I kind of beat up on the students a little bit. I'll go to youth groups, I'll go to conferences, churches, whatever, and I just beat up on them. And after about 30, 40 minutes, they get really defensive and angry. Almost always. And I step out of character and I say, okay, here's a question for you. How did you treat me? Give me words that describe how you treated me. And I'm telling you, like students go, oh my goodness, how's the church? How's arrogant? That's a tool that I use. Now there's online atheist role plays. If you search atheist role play, I did it at one school and it went viral and got like 5 million views. I wish it was on my YouTube channel. I'm like, dang it, I use my stuff. You could use that, but you could also role play yourself. But in that point, sometimes when we get students out and it humanizes it with others, they go, oh, here's a Latter-day Saint. This is a real person with a family. So the way I teach it and the way I set up encounters with others is I teach them, like, we're not trying to win arguments here. We're trying to love people. That's the purpose. And we can love them by removing barriers. But let's be kind. Let's be gracious how we do it. I try to teach and model that in all the apologetics that I do. Yeah.
This is kind of another practical idea, but also to get your take on it, because I'd love to hear some feedback on it, maybe take the next level. Well, we purchased the Apologetics Bible study for students, the Apologetics Bibles for students. Yes, usually Christian Standard version, but anyone that doesn't have one, we give that to them. It's like, hey, here's an Apologetic Study Bible.
That's
for
awesome.
you. And then there's times where we pull from that and go, hey, we're going to talk about this topic in your Bible. If you have one of these, bring it, or this is what we're going to discuss on this night. And so that's what we purchased to give away to our students. So is there anything like that maybe to add to it? I know more than the carpenter, but other things that we can add to it, or just maybe take it to the next level on that?
I love that. That's one of my favorite projects I was a part of, the Apologetic Study Bible for students. It's got features woven all the way through it, including one-page answers to the top 150 questions students have about transgender, hell, you name it. So that's a good teaching tool to give students. I mean, for graduating high school students, that's where probably evidence and demands verdict would come in more than a carpenter. That's where it's like, here is a resource that goes through all the big issues. Keep it, put it on your shelf, and just have it. And honestly, for a lot of people, it can become like a security blanket. Like, okay, I know there's answers, it's there. But outside of the Apologetic Study Bible, that's one that I would do. I would also introduce students into good, like, apologists online. Like, introduce them to Stuart and Cliff Connectly. Some of your students are probably following their stuff. They're doing great work. biblically grounded. Introduce them to what Elisa Childers is doing, what Alan Parr is doing, and make those connections for them. They can take that with them as well. I'm taking an obvious hint that you are slowly moving up here. I mean, you know.
Was it subtle? Was it subtle? I was trying to be.
It was subtle.
Really quick, tell everybody where they can get more of you, because you mentioned the book title really fast.
Yep.
What are your Instagram, your TikTok, whatever? Like, share a little bit of that. Do a little. We need to know more, because this is a great starter, but you're putting a ton of great content online as well.
Perfect. So you've got the book, More Than a Carpenter. And by the way, that is a quick, short book. There's a study guide with it. If that's helpful to give out to inquisitive students, you need something for kind of just a quick study to go through. We just updated it. And what's interesting about that is it starts with my dad's story of being sexually abused, of having a father that was just abusive and distant. Never dreamed that just how broken our culture's become, that would make it even that much more powerful. I am on Instagram. You can find it. Just search my name and find it. My website, SeanMcDowell.org. My YouTube channel, if that's helpful. I'm doing 1 or 2 videos a week, mostly on kind of apologetic type issues. So if you want to kind of stay in touch with books that are coming out and resources and conversations. Sometimes I debate atheists on there. Sometimes I talk with LGBTQ folks. Interviewed Newsboys 6 days ago, was kind of fun, on why a lot of musicians are deconstructing their faith. So that's a resource that might be helpful as well. And that's actually an in-depth, the one on the bottom right, that Barna study, we did a kind of an in-depth unpacking of that study. So if that's helpful, you could watch that first and decide if you want to buy the study, because those studies are not cheap, but it's there for free if that's helpful.
That's terrific. And I saw a tweet this morning that said you're looking for people for psychedelics. Is that what I really read?
I did, yeah.
I was like, okay, we got more content coming out. That's great.
Hey, by the way, there's one other free thing in the back. Did this study. There's probably, I don't know, 15 or 20. Soundback is using this. It's on the big ethical questions, and this is a study guide that goes with it. There's a video series. It's free. Just take it if you're like, I'm open to considering using this. You don't have to, but if that helps you and you're looking for a resource on ethical issues, just grab one. It's called Think Biblically in the back and just take a look at it.
Thanks, Sean. Terrific. Let's give a big round of applause. Thank you.